in a situation where he had dug some wells and the people who were there covered the wells up. Have you ever found yourself working toward a goal that God has given you, and then some people come in on the back end and cover up specifically what God told you to do? So what he did was he found himself praying to God, and when he was praying to God, he realized that God was going to be the one that was going to help him. And in his prayer, God says to him, "Fear not, because I am with you. I will bless you and multiply your descendants." And that's what we must understand, is that no matter how challenging life may get, we're not to find fear in the challenge that we're facing. We can see here Isaac found himself, his servants were digging wells. And think about that. You're pushing forward to do what God has called you to do. At every single turn, there seems to be a challenge. There seems to be a difficulty. There seems to be some kind of chaos connected to it. And he finds himself going to where? He's going to God. And that's what we must understand. In order for us to be successful with what God has called us to do, we must be willing to go to God each and every time in order to get what God has in store for us. And we cannot allow fear to hinder us from doing what we've been called to do. Fear is simply false evidence appearing real. When we want to be successful, we must go into any task, any situation, any circumstance, any trial, any vision that God has given us. We must be willing to go forth to make that happen simply by the will that God has given us, and we must be willing to go forward because we understand that it's God, and it's God by himself who's the one who can help us in those situations and circumstances. And we have here Isaac, who was doing what God wanted him to do. They had to have water, so his servants were digging wells. But every single time the wells were dug, somebody filled them up. How many times do you find yourself in that situation where you're doing God's will, and somebody seems to want to hinder you from doing what you've been called to do? 1 Kings, chapter number 17, verse number 13. It says, "Then Elijah said to her, 'Do not fear. Go, do as you have said, but make a little bread cake from it first, and bring it out to me, and afterwards you may make one for yourself and for your son.'" We remember the lady who, the widow, who found herself with nothing left. She spent all of her resources. And now she finds herself in a situation, a circumstance where she's looking for some help. She's looking for some help from anywhere possible. But here comes Elijah. Elijah comes and says to her, "Give me a little bit first, and then I will be able to help you with your situation and your circumstance." In life, there's going to be times when we find ourselves where it looks like there's no way we're going to be able to make it out of the situation, the circumstance, the trial, the difficulty that we're facing. But we must trust in the abilities that God has given us in order for us to be successful with what he's called us to do. Here, this lady has only a little bit. Have you found yourself with only a little bit, and everybody wants a part of that little bit, but you're trying to discern specifically who gets what? This lady finds herself with only a little bit, so she's already declared what's going to happen. I am going to eat what I have, and then I am going to die. Even though sometime in our lives we have predicted our future, there's always an opportunity for God to come in and interrupt what we've spoken over our lives. Here is a lady, finds herself at the end of life, at the end of the road. There's nothing in the bank account. There's nothing in the kitchen. There's nothing in the refrigerator except a little bit in the cabinet. And when you find yourself where there's just a little bit in the cabinet, watch specifically what God tells you to do. Watch specifically what he wants you to do, because there's always something that he has in store for us. We remember Abraham finds himself with his only son, or his only son by Sarah, at he's on the mountainside. He's about to sacrifice his son, but he trusted God. And here's another example of trusting God. And then when you trust God, God can move. That is the only way that we can get what God has in store for us, if we trust in him and we fear not. Another example of how a servant of God says to the lady, fear not. Go, do as I say, and things are going to be different. If we fast forward in this particular story, this lady's son died. Her son died, so she asked the same man who just made sure she had enough in her pantry. This same man, her son died, she asked the question, now, have you brought some difficulties on me? And sometimes we think our blessings are a curse because at one time they're blessing us, and at the next time we feel like they're cursed because they're with us. This lady finds herself in a situation where she thinks it's almost over. Now she's been fed, her stomach is full, but now the thing that she loved is also being sacrificed. So the baby is dead. Elijah had to be there at the right place at the right time, because just imagine if she already declared through her words, she'd already cursed her situation by her words. Now it has been fulfilled. But God sends somebody to interrupt the plans that she's already spoken over her life. And that's what we must figure out is, what have we spoken over our lives? Whatever we've spoken over our lives, we must understand that in order for us to change that, we must have some different type of words that we speak out of our mouth. If we speak different words out of our mouth, our outcomes will be different. And here we have this lady who finds herself with the last things, and she gives it to a prophet called Elijah. And if we rewind the story, Elijah finds himself where he has to trust God too, because he finds himself being fed by a raven next to a brook, and then the brook dries up. Could you imagine that you've been called to do something and you find yourself in a situation where it dries up too? So the job that you have over here dries up, so you're laid off here. Then you go to another job, it dries up, you laid off there. Then you go to another job, it dries up and you're laid off there. You say, well, am I picking the wrong job? I ask that you look at it from a different perspective. Is there a reason why I'm in this particular position, in this particular circumstance, at this particular time? And what is it that God's trying to teach me? Or what is it life is trying to teach me? Or who am I assigned to in those particular locations? And have I fulfilled my purpose in those particular locations? Because there's something that's within your purpose that you must be willing to do in each and every situation that we find ourselves in. We got to understand that it's God who can help us. We must understand that in order for us to be successful, in order for us to get to where God wants us to be, we must know that God knows specifically what we need. In Matthew chapter number 10, verses 30 and 31, God knows every hair on your head. Every single string of hair has been numbered, and God knows specifically what number they are. Now I want you to think about that. There are 8 billion people on the earth, but he knows specifically every single string of hair that's on your head. That's a God that pays attention to details. And we must be willing to pay attention to details. We must be able to hear specifically what our purpose is at a particular time. Sometimes we end up overstaying our purpose in a situation and we wonder why there's so much chaos. Sometimes we overstay ourselves on the job and wonder why there's so much chaos on that particular job. It's because we've been there too long. We need to move on when God says move on. Whenever he creates unrest in our spirit, there's a time for us to move to do something different, because he wants to make sure that we have peace. Does he not provide peace? Or perfect peace? And if he provides a perfect peace, should the situation or circumstance that we find ourselves in, shouldn't they be perfect? Shouldn't they be positions of peace? Or should it always be chaos? If it should always be chaos, why, when they found themselves on the sea and the rain came and the storm came, he said, peace, be still? Why was there peace? There was peace because God is the one who provides peace. And we must understand that he knows every single hair that's on our head. Revelation chapter number 1, verses 17 and 18, it says, and when I saw him, I fell at his feet as a dead man. He laid his right hand upon me, saying, do not be afraid. I am the first and last, and the living one, and I was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and of Hades, or death and hell. We're not to fear, because God has already prepared a place for us. There is life beyond the grave. And the life beyond the grave is very simple. If you know Christ, you have no reason to be in fear. The reason that you need not be in fear is because God has the power. He's already given you a mansion in heaven. And that mansion in heaven is already assigned to you. But the key to be successful with that mansion in heaven is you cannot have any fear. You must trust in God. Fear not, for I am with you. And we can see that God has the ability to help us. God bless you. Thank you very much.